Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I'm your host, David Strege, and welcome to another episode of Inside Movies Galore. And I am joined by Katie Cadaver. Hello, Katie.
Hi.
Also in attendance, we have Dustin. Dustin.
What? Oh, hey.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah.
Also in attendance, we have Red Raven. Welcome back. Welcome back. And now it's been
Hi.
a skipped episode, but
Yeah.
and also we have Brandon.
Yo.
Attendance. As well, we have Jake in attendance as well. And hello, Jake.
How's it going?
Pretty good. And soon we will have Dane Kyle in the room, but he will introduce himself when he gets when he is available. So on tonight's episode, we will be discussing the film The Dark Crystal, which was filmed in 1982. And it was directed by Frank Oz and Jim Henson. So you know, ladies and gentlemen, we have a spoiler warning for you. We will be discussing many aspects of this film that could potentially spoil it for you. So this is your official warning.
See, we're like considerate now.
Isn't that nice of us to let you know that? Aw.
Or we're gonna be talking about like the plot and everything, so you know, you'd think it'd be intuitive, but now you know. Haha.
So I'm gonna explain simple synopsis of this film for those of you who do not know what it is about. Basically, it has a very dark tone to it, and the planet is dying, and you have two different races that were split apart by this shard of crystal. And there's a journey involved in a young gelding who goes on his own journey. Here's the thing. Every single character in this film is a puppet.
That's the best thing about it.
It's pretty cool.
Was this a first-time watch for you?
For who?
What's Katie?
For me? Okay. I didn't catch my name. Sorry. This actually, believe it or not, it was a first-time watch for me. This is one I sort of vaguely remember from childhood, but I feel like Labyrinth was really the Henson film that overshadowed this one in my life experience, and so I never really had a chance to sit down and watch the whole thing. I had seen, maybe bits and pieces of it here or there, but never sat down and committed to the whole thing. And funny enough, my daughter got it in her Easter basket or something at some point, and it's been sitting in our drawer with our DVDs and Blu-rays for quite a while. So I actually own it and finally had a chance to watch it in preparation for this podcast.
Okay. And I'm going to get back to you on some of your other views. So I'm going to go over to Dustin. Was this a first-time watch for you?
This actually was the first time watch for me too. I had heard of it, all throughout my lifetime, and it was very highly praised. But for one reason or another, I just never encountered it. And then this summer, during one of my Best Buy trips, I found the 4K Steelbook, and it's like, oh, that's cool. Oh, it's kind of cheap. I've never seen this. It's supposed to be pretty great. Let's try it. And then it sat on my shelf for 5 months, I think, before it was like, hey, we're gonna check it out. And I was pretty impressed, off the bat. I came in with pretty high expectations, and it really met most of those. It has a somewhat, I don't want to say generic. It's a fantasy movie, and it's got a somewhat difficult, to pin down, quest kind of plot line.
Okay.
So, for just kind of a quicker summary of it, this planet's ecosystem revolves around this crystal, and something happens and part of it breaks off, and that causes everything to kind of split into like light and dark versions. And it's about the quest to put the piece back and fix everything.
Restore the balance, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a better way to say it.
Moving over to Red Raven, was this a first-time watch for you?
No, I had seen this maybe like 10 years ago.
Okay.
But I couldn't remember much of it, so I rewatched it, and I really like this movie. I think it's pretty good. I've always liked a lot of Jim Henson stuff. I've been a huge fan of his since I was a kid, so all of his movies and that I've always enjoyed.
Okay. And what would you say would be an aspect that you enjoyed most about this film?
I don't know. I can't really think of one thing. I just think
it has a lot of strong points.
Yeah, it has a lot of strong points. I guess it's different from some of his other stuff, whereas the puppets are more colorful in a lot of his shows and TV things. This, the puppets weren't as colorful. They're all kind of like it has a darker tone to it, like we had said, and it separates itself from different Jim Henson things because it's, because of that, I guess.
Okay.
It's going for more realism, like serious storytelling, rather than his typical comedy.
Well, and very fantastical, right? Like other Muppety things are not as fantasy, I feel like, as this. And I think it has a lot to do with the artist that he had on board, that illustrator that helped him create it. But it's definitely a much more detailed and fantastical than typical Muppet stuff, which I thought was really cool.
Okay. Going over here to Brandon, was this a first-time watch for you?
No. I actually saw this not in theaters, but I did see it as soon as it came out to TV. So I guess still back in the 80s. And I remember I had a very personal experience with this film. It was one of the few films in my childhood that I would watch over and over and over again. We used to have an old worn out VHS tape, and that was one of the films on it. I like to think it's actually one of the second most watched films I've had, and as far as next to Great Outdoors. From my youth. Okay.
Going over to Jake, was this a first-time watch for you?
No, it actually, interestingly enough, Brandon was the one that introduced me to it first time. We, for a long time, were doing what we called movie game, where we both have very big collections. We both know a lot of movies. I'd show him something that he'd never seen. He showed me one. The first one we did, he showed me Dark Crystal. So that actually kicked off that whole thing. Unfortunately, due to time issues, that fell by the wayside a couple of years ago. But that's been what, I don't know, 5, 6, 8 years. I've lost track. 8.
Yeah, since like 2000.
Yeah, probably 8 or 9 years. But so I had somewhat of a distant memory of it. But it's also interesting because just in the larger Jim Henson thing, like Katie said, you kind of sometimes you gravitate towards one. I barely saw Labyrinth in bits and pieces as I grew up. I don't think I'd really seen Dark Crystal, but I did grow up with Willow. That was the one that I had seen as a kid. So it's like all of these kind of, and of course the Muppets, So the whole Jim Henson thing, it still has that nostalgia value pretty much, even if you see like part of it versus all of it or whatever. But I do think that this is one I would have probably had a higher impression if I had grown up with it,
Okay.
Not as bad as was the case with Heavy Metal by any means. That one, But it's a very likable movie, and we actually this time around I watched it with Brandon. We watched the 4K version, and
Pretty nice.
it's real detailed and really pretty in 4K.
The only kind of downside is that on some of the puppets you can tell, like a couple of them, like if you look really close, like you can kind of see like a seam on like the cast hands on some of the puppets.
Yeah, it does.
But other than that, glorious.
It does highlight some of the early '80s shortcomings, but it also shows how much detailed work went into it.
Yeah, that's a lot of work that went into that film.
Yeah, and that stands out more than like some of the holes. I mean, there was a scene where it's like, oh, I can see the string holding the crystal up. I don't care.
On that note, I'm going to go backwards a little bit and welcome Dane to the show. In the very beginning, we welcomed everyone. So welcome back, Dane.
Hi.
So on first impressions, what was this a first time watch for you?
No, I had seen the movie before. I had seen Labyrinth first, and to this day, I still like Labyrinth more because I think it's fantastical, but also entertaining, and it's got David Bowie, and and a young Jennifer Connelly. It's just like it's the perfect end. But
Everybody else grew up with that movie.
well, and I didn't see Labyrinth until college, but I saw Dark Crystal after that, and
Worst drinking game. That's all I'm gonna say about my experience with Labyrinth.
yeah, I remember college people where they like to play that game. But anyway, so for the Dark Crystal, I saw that later, and I enjoyed it. It was a very different. It's probably the most serious Jim Henson thing that he ever did in his lifetime, and it definitely. It's about as close to like a puppet version of Lord of the Rings or something of that caliber that we're ever going to get, which is, again, that's a compliment. And I would like to see more of that, like the art of puppetry and animatronics and creature suits. With the advent of CGI, it really did go away way too quickly. And I wish that you could see, like, imagine if you did an original creation in the vein of something as big as Lord of the Rings, and you did it with puppets and with animatronic creature suits and things like that. I think that'd be really cool. But I also fear that, you know, the viewing public is kind of desensitized to that kind of stuff now, and they wouldn't appreciate it, even though it's a valid art form. But I really enjoyed the creativity of it and the seriousness of it, as well as just the world building and, you know, that kind of thing.
Okay. On that note, I'm gonna.
Yeah, you should go pick up that 4K Steelbook at Best Buy because it's got quite a bit of extra stuff on it.
Yeah, I want to because I got the 4K of Labyrinth, which I absolutely love Labyrinth. But I do want to get the 4K of the Dark Crystal because
it's still kind of cheap too, so act while you can. There's an hour-long documentary that I was watching when we started. That's just like all like making of stuff, and it's an interview with Henson and just all the stuff you'd want to know. Plus, there's a special track where it plays the movie with the storyboards for the scenes like on the screen.
That's what our Blu-ray has.
And what
also,
was
I don't
the
have the
designer's name?
Steelbook.
Fround.
Yeah, the 4K.
Brian Froud.
Yeah, that's right. I think both movies, especially the Dark Crystal, they would not be the same without his amazing designs, because those are so iconic and so just immediately distinct. It's
What's clearly the best
say.
aspect about the entire film is
and it's just
creativity piece.
The world, like I said, the world building, the fact that it's not like all the derivative stuff that you always see today. It just feels like it came from pure imagination, and that's, I don't know if there's a higher compliment I can give any design team or even storytellers in general than to say, well done with the world building, the imagination.
I was gonna say raging creativity, but that works too.
I tend to agree. Now, my first impressions of this film, I've actually only ever seen this film once myself, because Labyrinth was always the film that I knew Jim Henson for more.
Man, like growing up, I had never even heard of Labyrinth, but I'd heard of Dark Crystal.
But one of the movies that is one of my fiance's favorite films of Jim Henson's is The Dark Crystal. So when we first got together, that was one of the films that she introduced me to, and I saw it once, maybe like 8 years ago, and for this film podcast, I watched it again. So my second impression is I liked it better this time around, more than I did last time, because I have an appreciation for the separation of cultures that we have here in this film. I mean, I get kind of like a Ewok versus what was it? Time Machine kind of vibe. With H.G. Wells
Fighting the Morlocks.
Yeah, the Morlocks versus the Eli kind of thing, where the Morlocks are underground and the Eloi lived above ground. You know.
There are actually some futurists who think that reality will eventually happen, kind of technological haves and have-nots.
And from what now. The first character that I'm going to ask each one of you about is the Skeksis, because the Skeksis are the darker creatures that were separated from the crystal. So, Red Raven, what did you think about the Skeksis characters? What did you think of
like the lizard-looking things, kind of?
Yeah.
I thought they were pretty interesting. They were, some of them look kind of pretty creepy.
Okay.
But for a puppet, it's a unique look. It's not something you'd see, like, you know, in any other of it, things I've ever seen, you know.
Okay.
It's a good design. I really liked it.
Brandon, what did you think of the Skeksis characters?
I had a very weird reaction to them as a child. You'd think I'd be scared because I was a very young child, but no, I actually, they were my favorite part of the film. I used to actually annoy people by emulating some of the ones like the Chamberlain one, and of course, I as a little kid, imagine me trying to reenact the terrible dining scene that they had.
Why?
In the movie, but they never really frightened me as much as I found them entertaining, and I actually was rooting for them as a kid, which was rather weird. The ones that scared me were the Gotham or Gartham or whatever it was. Those are the ones that scared me as a child. But I always thought they were very neat, how ornate they were, how well they were done. And even today, I have a very big appreciation for how much detail and work went into crafting those characters.
Yeah, they had a lot of like elaborate biology under their cloaks. Like that stood out to me. And it was kind of like it felt like that part of that scene where the Chamberlain like loses his rank and they like tear his robes off and like boot him from the castle. It felt like that was the purpose of that was almost to be like, see, there is actually something underneath, like these giant clothing that they're wearing. You know, it's not a cheat.
All right.
You notice how much storytelling gets communicated with just the noises that the Skeksis make, because I don't think we get subtitles for them. You know, it's just that's a testament to good storytelling when you don't even have to understand them to understand what they're saying or what they're doing.
Well, they spoke English in this cut.
Yeah, originally they did not, and I guess when they first screened the film, there was an issue with that. the audience didn't care for it, so they had to go back in and like dub voices instead of having like subtitles. Because I guess if you think about it, there's so much to look at in this movie that also having to read subtitles would be really annoying.
The kid's gonna read subtitles.
I think the one that I saw just had them making noises or whatever, but yeah, I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, well, how would they do exposition though? Because that's what a lot of their lines were in many scenes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it's a Star Wars Christmas special problem where they didn't do any subtitles for just like Wookiee roars. It's like, oh yeah, you're supposed to know. What do you mean we're supposed to know? That's stupid.
Yeah, we gotta watch that for Christmas because there's plenty to do an episode on. Let's just say
I've willingly watched that more times than I've watched any of the Disney Star Wars. I will stand by it. I will watch the Christmas special like 2 more times back to back before I watch another Disney Star Wars.
I don't think I've even heard of it.
Oh, you are
Christmas special
for years.
Yeah,
it's like one of the worst things ever committed to film.
Very infamous.
worse than like the Kiss movie. Kiss meets the Phantom of the Park.
Much
Yes,
worse.
Kiss is much more. The Kiss movie was 10 times more watchable than the Star Wars Christmas special.
Oh, it was a work of art compared to that.
Yeah.
Center of the Park was like entertaining. I mean, I thought it was. It was not especially quality per se, but it was entertaining for what it was. You know.
What, the Phantom of the Park or Star Wars?
Yeah, because it's the Phantom of the Park. Because
the Christmas special was just like this awful thing that tied you down and beat you with a rod. Like
the Star Wars Holiday Special is it's almost like a work of Dadaist art or something like that.
David Lynch, anti-art.
Except for the animated part with Boba Fett.
That was cool, yeah.
That's pretty cool. But yeah, it just overall, it's just such a okay. Case in point, George Lucas, despite okaying the prequels and the special editions and things.
Oh yeah, he really hated the Christmas special. Like he's on the record. If I could, I would track down every physical copy and destroy it myself.
And that tells you something.
To get Carrie Fisher to do the audio commentary for the original Star Wars trilogy, like one of the things like in her price was she demanded like a physical copy of it so that she could quote play it to get people to leave my house after parties. I think he did it too. I think he gave her a copy of it.
And I do miss her dry sense of humor.
So who didn't respond about their impressions about the Skeksis?
I have not. My initial impression of the Skeksis, I got a kind of a Splinter Animation vibe from the Skeksis, just a little bit, from Ninja Turtles.
The bird heads kind of didn't do that for me.
I was thinking in the face of some of the Skeksis that kind of had a rat-like look to them.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they had a similar construction history to Splinter.
I know that they were vultures.
They're part reptile, part predatory bird, and part dragon.
Yeah, they had a lot of crossover between anatomy. Like I really appreciated that. Just because of my biology background, it's like, oh, I can see a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and neat. So
all of the creatures.
Yeah, I was all over the creatures. The creatures were fucking great.
Oh my god, yes.
What did we think of the mystics?
They were a cool like foil to the Sidaxis. I'm already pronouncing the Skeksis. I'm so sorry, guys. So, like, they were meant to be in, like, the light aspect of the beings that the Skeksis and the... Fuck, I forgot their name. And the Ancients. The Mystics.
And when one of them dies, when the Skeksis dies, then one of the Mystics dies, too. It's like his mentor, Jen's mentor.
Yeah, that happens in everyone, too. Like, a Skeksis gets kicked into, like, a lava pit. And, like... because they were pretty subtle about it for a while until that scene, and it's like, oh, I bet they're gonna become like one being. Like, I bet the crystal split it. I was proud that I figured this out. Like, the crystal splitting, like, split these, high level entities into those two different groups of beings, like into like a light and a dark being. And when they like came back together at the end, like, that was really cool. I really appreciated that.
They did have the one scene earlier where the one injured his hand, and then you saw the complementary injury on the Mystic as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I always thought it was interesting, that scene, though, where the Mystics are trudging along, and all of a sudden one of them goes up in flame, and then they kind of just shrug and keep going.
Yeah.
It happens.
I think it's interesting whenever you have good and bad characters that are intrinsically tied to each other. Like in Marvel Comics, they have a character called the Sentry, who Marvel was trying to have a character similar to Superman, but one of the things that made him different was the fact that he had another character called the Void, which was kind of his equal and opposite reaction in the universe. So every good deed that he performed, the Void performed some evil deed or some kind of active.
Like the movie Unbreakable.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's really interesting to kind of all actions have an equal and opposite reaction.
See, I always thought of the Mystics as kind of boring to me, or bland in the end. Now, I find more of appreciation for them as I've gotten older, but as a child, they really didn't fascinate me that much.
Yeah, they don't look as cool as the Skeksis do.
Well, they looked as benevolent as the Skeksis looked menacing. So I thought they were a really good balance. And I personally like their design a lot.
Skeksy.
And some of them are kind of gross.
I was so into like the creature of it, because I really do like birds of prey. That's immediately what I saw, like the vulture, or real bird-like face, but then the dragon-y body, which was, I don't know. I got really into like the special features after watching the film, and really watched how they developed all of these characters, and I have such a deep appreciation for it as I develop characters myself out of things, like just watching how all of that was put together. One thing that was said that I thought was really cool is that these characters have a certain level of purity to them that you don't have when you use human beings, because you have human beings that have to act like this character. So you have this person trying to be this thing, whereas these are pure. These characters are that thing. They're created specifically to be that thing. And I just thought that was really cool. That resonated with me, that purity of character.
Okay. What did we think of Jen as a character?
He looked kind of like... Did anybody ever play that old PC game, Lemmings?
Yeah.
Like, he looked like that to me. Like, I thought he was kind of... He was still like an amazing puppet, but to me he was kind of the least convincing puppet. Like, if you looked at him in the scene the right way, it's like, yeah, I can sort of tell that's a puppet. But he didn't have necessarily a whole ton of character to him, because he's just meant to be...
He didn't.
I think he's just meant to be like a hero, you know what I mean?
But he almost had no challenge, like, to his, or no like transformation of his character. Like, really was transforming the environment or the what was around him, but he himself didn't seem to go through a lot.
He's supposed to be the one you project yourself upon.
Yeah. At least that's the kind of idea I saw it as.
I guess I'm just used to those hero characters kind of having an arc or something.
Like complexity.
It seemed like Kira was more of a character that I could relate to, or that I had. I was invested in what happened to her almost more.
That's because they did kind of when they did that dream sequence, which was actually kind of cool. Where they were, what was it? Dream fasting,
I think they called it.
when they were dreamcasting, they were sharing each other's memories, and her memories were a hell of a lot more vivid than the ones that were coming from his childhood, even though his parents were killed by the so-called Skeksis.
Yeah, they were. What do you mean so-called? They were both like orphaned in like that Kefling purge, and like he got adopted right away, and like so did she, but she like had to grow up in the woods and stuff. So there was kind of more for them to cover with her too. Plus, we'd already seen a fair amount of Jem. So I think that's why they've emphasized her a bit more in that. So plus, from what I could tell from the extras, they were somewhat invested in like fleshing out female characters more, just to kind of be something different for the times, which is always pretty cool, I think.
So, speaking of another character in the film, what did we think of Agra?
I loved her. I love that she had nipples poking out of her dress too.
I am so happy I didn't notice that.
I kept on thinking because of Labyrinth, Agra, the voice of Agra, which is Frank Oz, also voiced the
Yoda.
woman. No, the woman who was
Like in the trash heap.
In the trash heap, yes. And I kept on thinking of her whenever I was thinking that, but I didn't.
Yeah, I thought that too. They remind me of each other.
Of my childhood.
He's good at the female voices, like with Miss Piggy.
He reminded me of that one reminded me of a combination between Yoda and Miss Piggy.
My daughter mentioned my daughter made the Yoda reference also. She's a big Star Wars fan, and she said, "Oh yeah, totally Yoda."
If you listen to his Yoda, like in the early days, like in Empire Strikes Back, if you listen, you can definitely hear Miss Piggy in there.
And Grover.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit.
Grover.
I'm a Sesame Street kid. That's how I first got introduced to Jim Henson, was Sesame Street, and then, just
I love it all. I love Sesame Street. I love Muppets, Dark Crystal Labyrinth.
Old school Sesame Street, not this Elmo crap.
What's wrong with Elmo?
What about, remember Fraggle Rock? I used to love that show.
Oh, Fraggle Rock's great.
Oh man, it's been so long.
When it's totally just Elmo and no other characters, I'm sorry.
My kid had an Elmo phase. Most kids go through an Elmo phase. She did. It was fine. We got through it.
I love Elmo.
I'm sorry. When that Tickle Me Elmo came out, that was just a joke.
Wasn't the panic over how it had like a satanic laugh, just like the best?
Oh, God.
Back in
My brother was afraid of it.
Like, please
honestly, there's actually quite a lot of. You guys got to check out. Look for Mike Mozart. He pronounces it as Mozart, even though it's spelled Mozart. But he does, or he used to do anyway, these fail toy reviews, and there are a surprising number of Elmo toys that had something strange or inappropriate about them. Like, for example, like there's this
satanic laugh Elmo. I'll take 10.
Yeah. I don't think I was on that.
And flips it here. In the early releases of it was, oh, what the guy? That's what it sounded like. And then they promptly changed it in the later releases, but there's like a ton of them that have strange or potentially controversial things about them.
Don't forget the one that said that went maniacal laugh.
Like you mean in the Muppets, the 2011 movie?
Yes.
Another vibe I got from the Dark Crystal was the fact that this film set the groundwork for the show that Jim Henson's creations would eventually call Eureka's Castle.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I haven't thought about that show in so long. Holy
the
crap.
geldings reminded me of Eureka and her castle.
Didn't she have horns?
Yeah, she had horns.
This one
So
also.
did
And there was a big dinosaur-looking thing, right?
There were 3 fishes that spouted water in a waterfall or something like that. And they
been
were
like-
green fishes.
It's been like 27 years. Give me a
No,
break.
there was a big green dinosaur, and it was like the main character in that.
Yeah,
Sure. All right.
I don't think I know that one.
I grew out of that one before when it debuted. I was too old for that one at the time. So
but
I did read that this one also inspired Fraggle Rock, and that was one I did see a little when I was a kid.
I love that show. That's like one of my favorites.
I have to admit, I have the complete Fraggle Rock. So
and that's getting a re-release on Blu-ray, I believe.
Yeah,
Oh,
I never watched that show, and I would love to see it. We should watch sometime if we're in a puppet mood. We should watch a highly underrated direct-to-video Muppet thing called Muppet Classic Theater, where they do.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, it sounds
love-
familiar.
I'd want to do Muppet Treasure Island because I love those jokes so much.
Yeah,
He
I love
died?
both of
This is
those,
a
but
kid's movie.
I love both of those, but I feel like the Muppet Classic Theater is very underrated because it was direct-to-video. Not a lot of people have heard of it, but I had very fond memories of it.
So it wouldn't be us without ridiculous tangents, guys. Sorry.
Well, actually,
At
you
least they're
did-
Muppet related.
You did just mention one though, like that. I was interested when I was reading up on this, and Henson had said that he intended Dark Crystal to be sort of a return to like the Brothers Grimm kind of storytelling, which he's like, kids like being scared, and I like the idea of someone who doesn't talk down to kids, who treats them as people who can handle stuff, because Lord knows those Brothers Grimm ones were not safe and traumatized.
That reminds me of something I heard on another podcast recently. It was like they were talking about like discussing like news footage from McCain's funeral, and somebody, because it was raining, somebody was like, "The angels are crying," and the commentators were like, like that's not even a child would say that. Like that's so unbelievably stupid. Like that's something you tell a child. That's something you tell a 10-year-old, and they'd be like, "Don't patronize me."
what do you think of the astrological machine in Olgra's lair?
I loved it. That was one of my favorite things. I have that listed in my notes under favorites.
The orrery.
Her model of the heavens, or whatever you want to call it.
It's an orrery.
Or what now?
Or it's hard to pronounce. Orrery. Orrery.
Orrery? Okay,
Yeah,
model
it's
of the
spelled
heavens. That was easy.
Oh.
Say that 3 times fast. Orrery, orrery, orrery.
Oh, thank you.
Learn some words, Dane.
I have words. I have the best words, but there's no better
Not in Middle English.
I heard you. I use
Yes,
that.
I very much liked that thing. I thought that was cool, and I watched in the special features when they were like filming that part of the movie, and because I wondered, is that really all of that there? Did they build that? And they did,
Oh yeah.
and that just amazes me.
The practical effects and designs in the film were quite amazing. It was on a scale that we don't usually see in any type of movie.
Oh, nobody works that hard anymore. Are you kidding? That is so much work. They did.
Let's just press a button and make this shit work, okay?
Yeah, you just can create it on a computer. Like just the amount of like carpentry and artistry and the costumes, everything. I appreciate it so very much. It's
Press
such
34 buttons.
amazing thing to me.
Ooh, 5 seconds later.
Well, we'll see what they do with the Netflix series.
Yeah.
Because that, for all we know, that could integrate practical effects along with, the advents of CGI, which are not bad. They just need to be used in moderation.
Could be all CGI.
Well, sometimes moderation doesn't necessarily work. Like in Curse of Chucky, they use like, the practical doll for most of it, and then there's one shot where he's walking the stairs where they use CGI, and it's like so obvious it hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It totally takes you out of the moment.
There are still people who do a lot with practical effects and puppets and that kind of thing, but it's almost always blended with CGI. Like Leica Studios does a lot of stuff with their sets, the building, the carpentry, puppet, but then they blend it with CGI to give it like a gloss, and But
That I can appreciate.
yeah.
It's a good blend of techniques. Like that.
The Walking Dead does that as well. K&B do that with their effects. It's a lot of practical effects and then layered with the digital stuff that you just can't recreate, but you get that really perfect mix. I think that's probably the best way to do it.
They did that on Remake Freddy in the Jackie Earle Haley version. Like they had part of his cheek like green screened, and that's how they got like the hole in the side of his face. Which it didn't work so good there, so I just wanted to provide a counterpoint.
Let's talk. I mean, what about Full Moon Studios? Most of theirs is born off of practical effects. I just got finished watching Evil Bong 777 again. Which,
how do you debase yourself like that?
Which it has, and that's all. That's not all practical effects. It's practical effects mixed with green screen, and not all practical effects appear to be really, really complex. Some of them look a tad lazy at times.
I'll be excited.
Even so, the sculpts took a lot of work.
Well, some of the I a little bit of the An American Werewolf in London, and like when the wolf is like in the very beginning, like it's like they have to cut away pretty fast because you can tell it's obviously not real. As much as I love practical effects, sometimes they don't age very well.
It's kind of funny, like in American Werewolf, the transformation I think holds up better than the actual wolf.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
100%.
Transformation like kicks butt, but the wolf, it's like, oh, you can more or less tell it's just like a puppet.
It's just like shake the wolf head off screen. Go on, shake it.
Or well, I was gonna say in terms of Full Moon, like I kind of don't care for Full Moon, like until they put out like a Prehysteria box set or like release Pet Shop or something. Like
they're releasing Hysteria on Blu-ray, DVD. So
oh my fucking god, yes!
Not
so bad.
Not the sequels, but they're releasing the first one.
Well, they should release all of them. What are you doing, Charles Band? You money-hungry son of a... I've heard not great things about him. That's where my opinion comes from. I'm sorry.
I've heard different things about him.
I'll be right back.
I want to say dishonest and grifter, but I don't know. The person I heard that from, it sounded like they had been burned like in some way and like had an axe to grind. So that's probably exaggeration.
Some people don't think that he's a real independent filmmaker because he comes from money.
Ah, that would explain a lot.
But I don't believe. I personally don't believe that a person's money has any bearance on anyone. To me, so that I mean.
That Charles Band come on the show.
Their films, so the hell what? As long as it looks good,
Oh, and shoot, he was behind the Puppet Master series. There's no more iconic practical effects series out there.
He could be annihilated for the film Legacy. That was just a ripoff of his earlier films.
Well, we got way off topic here.
Oh yeah.
We're early on the topic. We're done with
it. Started with that whole device, the augury or whatever the thing it was.
The augury. That's like divination. Augury.
We can say we discussed effects.
Yeah, we did discuss effects, but somehow we got.
Well, I had some stuff on my effects, like in a lot of the scenes, it's kind of tough to believe that they're actually puppets, despite how the main character doesn't quite hold up sometimes. Like the scene in the swamp where there's just everything in front of you is vividly alive and moving.
Yeah.
Wow.
I loved that one. That was
Convincing.
so cool.
And I was
Yeah.
thinking those look like they based it off of like undersea life or whatever, and I just thought that was it's
Yeah, the plants that are alive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
there's a lot of
there's
exotic biology. Exotic biology, I think, would be my summary
Yeah,
of
totally.
a lot
That's
of
a
this
good
movie.
descriptor.
So plus in the extras they were talking about how they paid very close attention to how living things would move
Yes.
to get like the fluid motions, and like they just like nailed it. Like it's like they pushed the concept of a puppet as a practical effect like as far as it could go.
Totally.
What did we think about the device that took the essence of the characters?
Took what?
Took the
essence
of the characters.
That thing was fucking scary. Like goddamn. Like I was sitting there like, yeah.
That creeped me the heck out as a kid.
I bet.
I was scared of that when I viewed this movie. That was one of the two things that scared me. That and the spider critters. That was the
They're crab-like creatures, actually.
What, those awesome crabs? Like I thought they were pretty fucking cool.
They were
Those were my
crab
favorites.
noodles. So
those reminded me of the banthas on Tatooine.
Awesome.
They're kind of hunched over like it, yeah.
Yeah.
Although I felt like the wise ones looked more like banthas, like from a distance, because they had them like walking through the desert, and it's like banthas. Yeah. Oh no, right, it's them.
But you know that when you're going back to that slave machine, I mean, when you've got the scene where he's got the female lead and she's being drained, and they have that last minute save where she calls the animals to try and help her out. That was a very intense scene because you already got to see how nasty the thing did and how it effects worked. I mean, you could even see the dark circles under her eyes throughout up until the end after that scene.
Yeah, I was watching that and it's like, oh yeah, they're not gonna kill her. She's the main character. And then like near the end of that, I was like, wait, are they actually gonna kill her?
Why do they have to pick on the damsel in distress? Why do they gotta pick on the poor innocent?
She seemed more capable than Jem in a lot of scenes. Like she had like the escape route. Another really cool biology thing I thought was like they were very aware of trying to incorporate like at least some biological realism into it, or at least apply concepts. And I think maybe my favorite part of this movie was when she's like, "All right, hold on," and then she jumps out and like she has wings, and he's like, I don't have wings. That's because you're a boy.
Yeah.
So I really appreciated the biology jokes and references in this.
At the very beginning, just the opening narration that kind of sets.
It was like a nature documentary. Like that was my immediate impression. It's like not that I'm watching a movie. It's like I'm watching, sci-fi David Attenborough. Like he's out there somehow just like filming all these creatures in Fantasyland. And it's like I'd be down for a movie like that. That's a cool movie.
The narrator wasn't British enough for that. That would have been a whole interesting.
British enough.
If anybody is a fan of the Crystal Method, you'll recognize that opening, another world, another time. That whole thing. Is that in the very beginning of their song, Trip Like I Do from the Vegas album.
I always thought of Secret of NIMH when I listened to the narrator.
Okay.
I love that movie. We gotta watch that.
I haven't seen it in such a long time. I remember it involves rats, but that's about it.
Oh, there's some...
I know there's more. That's the joke.
It's a vastly underrated film.
That was an American Tale.
I love that movie. That's an awesome movie. Although I think I actually like Five Goes West better.
I never saw the first one.
Like it's a lot more fun.
Yeah, I know that the first one's supposed to be really depressing.
It frankly is. You've seen it, right?
No, I haven't. I've only seen the second.
It'll bum you out fairly good. Like, not gonna lie. Like a lot of people, a lot of characters definitely die. They just don't do it on camera.
Just going back onto the topic of parts that were kind of more creepy, did anybody consider it creepy when Jin was in the dark and then all of the eyes of the Gartham just suddenly came up around him?
I was just drunk enough at that point to be like, oh shit, like out loud. Like, that was kind of like, yeah, get out of there.
I was creeped out a little bit the first time around. I mean, you get kind of desensitized once you've seen it once, and but the second time around, I definitely had a lot more appreciation for some of the I think that they made leaps and bounds in this this film for its time.
No question.
I was too enamored with all of that to be creeped out by this movie at all, because I just kept asking, how did they do that? How did they do that? How did they do that?
Fair. Although I'm starting to wonder, like, did anybody see the Bigfoot movie Abominable from like the early 2000s?
No.
The shot in the tunnels with all of the, I cannot remember the crab monsters' names. I'm so sorry.
Gartham.
Darthams. All the shot with, you know, he's down there and like all the eyes light up. That's basically the last scene of Abominable, and I can't help but wonder, it's like, did they lift that? The big twist at the end of that movie is, you know, they kill Bigfoot after it kills a bunch of people, and the cops are there like to haul away the body, and the body's gone, and they turn around, and then just there are just dozens and dozens of Bigfoot eyes lighting up in the woods. And it's creepy. Those people fucking died. Like,
did anybody ever see another Bigfoot movie, Willow Creek?
Oh yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen any Bigfoot
it's
movie.
bad. Don't watch it.
Wait, Harry and the Hendersons, does that count?
That's a much better movie. Willow Creek wishes it was half as good as Harry and the Hendersons.
I love Harry and the Hendersons.
That movie's so fucking good. Holy crap.
Scratch that. I have seen a Bigfoot movie. Sorry.
I really like Willow Creek. I thought it was one of the better found footage I've seen.
It's like Bobcat Goldthwait's in it. Somehow.
Yeah, well, he directed it, and it wasn't in it.
I bought it at Family Video when I was processing Family Video movies. Like, I watched it once, I was like, this sucks, and then somebody bought it, and I haven't thought of it since.
Well, Bobcat Goldthwait did direct God Bless America, so it is worth giving it a shot then.
Well, he also did World's Greatest Dad. That's a depressing movie.
Well, man, but anyway, back to effects. Like, it was so cool how so much of the environment was alive.
Yes.
I mean, I can't praise the at least acknowledgement of real world biology enough. Right, Kabuki Jake? You probably appreciated that too, right?
So some say that the Skeksis language was conceived by an author by the name of Alan Gamer, who based it on ancient Egyptian. There is another person who stated that he created it, and it was formed from Indo-European roots.
So there's actually a history behind that?
Yeah, evidently.
Wow.
There's a conspiracy as to who actually created the language behind the Skeksis.
Conspiracy.
I did want to go back to the special effects. I had another thing I wanted to add. I don't know if anybody watched the special features, but when they were showing how they put the characters together and the costumes on people, they actually had small TV monitors inside of the costumes so that the people in them could see what was happening outside of their costume and help them to move and like be where they needed to be in those costumes. And they said it took them about like a minute and a half or so to get like in and out of them so that they could like have people in and out easily instead of, oh, it takes you 15-20 minutes to get in or out, so you're just going to stay in it for hours and be less like able to do things and to move. Like, I thought that was really cool planning and forethought to be able to get people out of these costumes so that, you know, they can still perform at a high level, because they got to get out and take a break or do whatever. Like I know it's for me, like when I do makeup and I go to a convention or whatever, I'm in it for 18 hours or something of the day. It's like I can't imagine spending a day filming a movie being in a costume like that. So I thought that was really cool. I guess that counts as special effects, but especially with the TVs inside of them.
Yeah, that 4K version actually really did reflect how amazing the special effects were, because even with the extra clarity, there was only a small bit of it that came through that looked fake, because it still had, you actually got to see so much more. It was quite amazing, the detail.
Yeah, that's why that's yeah. Yeah, I noticed that pretty early on. And I think I made a point of that earlier on too. But I know we're not used to having like a structure here. So
What about the music? What did you guys think of the music? Because
music was rad. Like
Music was awesome.
I've seen the
I thought it
vinyl
worked
around,
really well.
and I'm kind of thinking of picking up if I see it again.
Really,
I was really impressed by the music.
that was Trevor Jones, who I guess has done a lot, like a lot of like adventure movie scores.
He did From Hell. I remember that.
He did the Last of the Mohicans soundtrack.
When he was blowing in that flute, it reminded me of Zelda for whatever reason.
Oh, like Link, yeah.
Yeah, I almost wonder
Searching
if
for the crystal.
I almost wonder if they took some inspiration from this movie, because doesn't this predates Zelda, right?
I believe it does.
Yeah, because 82.
Yeah.
Yeah.
82,
Well, and it
what,
took them
84,
5 years
85?
to make this movie, so they came up with the concept well before that.
Yeah, I think the first Zelda game came out in Japan in 1986, and then it came out 1 year later in America.
So, is there anything else that anyone wants to say?
I want to talk about my favorite character, who is Fizzgig. Nobody mentioned Fizzgig.
Yeah, Fizzgig, that little fluffy thing. That was
Yes,
so
the
cute.
little
Oh my
Kitty
god.
dog, Fluffball. I know. I just want to.
Leviathan teeth, and he, in a way,
Yes.
I have
of an earlier animal.
I have in my notes as the Krite Poodle, because he looked like a Krite from Critters.
The one
Oh
that
yeah.
the one that reminded me of, if you ever see the show Take On Me Boxing or Letter B, there's a character called Steak, and they reminded me a lot of Steak.
If you've ever seen,
Well, mixed with a gremlin, really.
I actually think that when I saw Steak the first time, I actually thought of that character from the Dark Crystal.
See, I thought of Fizzgig as being like mixed with a treble from Star Trek with Leviathan teeth. That's what I was thinking. So
He had so much character for being a furry thing with eyes.
Right.
You know, like just his movements, like, and that's what I love about Muppets.
favorite-
They're so expressive.
my
It's
favorite,
like, remember Ambrosius from The Labyrinth?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And how hyper he was and like running around.
so expressive, right? And they don't need to have a lot of detail on
Right.
some of these characters to make them really expressive, and that's in the puppeteering.
Fizzgig might have been an earlier Ambrosius.
Yeah, Labyrinth did come out 4 years later. But
They like
actually-
recycled his ideas.
I liked the part where Agra said, "What are you doing hanging around here?"
After
The eyeball
Vine,
that popped out.
I thought that was cool. That reminded me of Crumb from Real Monsters, if anyone remembers that show.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
I kind of wonder if that's where they got the idea for Crumb. For those who don't know, Our Real Monsters was a Nicktoon in the 90s, and one of the monsters, his name was Crumb, and his eyes weren't attached to his body. He would just like carry them around like in his hands, and he could like throw them around places, and they'd still work.
I
Was
feel
he
like I've seen
green?
that before.
What?
Was he green?
No, he was like
purple
flesh tone. He was
I
basically
like
like a walking
the
mouse. He
creature.
was weird.
I like the creature in Pan's Labyrinth where the eyes came out of his hands.
A little bit like that, except the eyeballs weren't free floating there.
Yeah, like I feel like that concept's been done before, but I can't put my finger on where. Like eyes detached from body, but like I don't know. I can't think of.
The earliest I know of it is from this movie.
That might be.
So, I mean, I'd only ever seen it in that cartoon before today, and it's like, oh, I wonder if that's where they got the idea.
Actually, one of the notes I'd written down for just at the end was to think about, because there were two films that were always that are always talked about in relation to this one these days. One of them, of course, is Labyrinth, which I never saw Labyrinth beforehand. I saw Labyrinth around the same time as that, so it really didn't. Neither one really hit me more than the other. But the other one that came along later that they always package with, and you're talking about mixing the practical with the computer effects, was Mirror Mask, which had a very similar theme and structure.
When did that come out?
That was in the late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, Jim Henson long passed, but I believe the company still worked on it. A lot of times when they package the other two movies together in a set or trilogy, they would package Mirror Mask in with it.
Interesting. I've never heard of that one.
Well, it's a really neat one. It's got one of the creepiest renditions of the song.
Did I hear they're making a Dark Crystal too? There was rumors of that, or no?
Netflix is doing something. Yeah.
Oh, Netflix.
A prequel, though.
They're a prequel or a sequel, and they don't know whether it'll happen. I know that there's been rumblings for quite some time about whether they will or will not return to the Dark Crystal story. I think
there was a Robot Chicken like sketch about the Dark Crystal.
I think if I remember correctly,
maybe as close as we get.
They were supposed to do something with it, but they were also supposed to make a sequel to that 80s film, The Explorers.
Oh, what?
I would love to see a prequel to the Dark Crystal, like getting into Jen's previous life and, you know, a little bit more detail. I think that would be a neat place to start, and like how this all came about, what got us to this point.
Like an origin story, that'd be pretty cool.
The graphic novels they did for Dark Crystal and Labyrinth were also pretty cool at the time.
Probably still cool now.
Ultimately, is there anything else that anyone wants to add to this film?
Did we miss anything?
Yeah, the only other thing I had noted was there was some note about Full Moon and Devlin's Monster Museum in Las Vegas, but I can't remember what that's about.
Oh, that reminds me, about like 10 years ago, they had an exhibit on Jim Henson at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, and I actually went to it, and I saw they had some of the props from this movie, but they had like Sesame Street and Fraggle Rock, and it was a really good exhibit.
Oh, I'm sad I missed that.
Yeah.
That was really cool. There was one note that we didn't talk about. Again, I paid a lot of attention to the, you know, how did they make this all happen? And it was mentioned that they use dancers and mimes and like the people who actually played these creatures. Like, I mean, one guy for those landsliders or whatever, the stilt walkers, like they had all these people who were really like stage performers and dancers and people who really had to be able to perform with their entire bodies to create the movement for these creatures. I found that to be really cool because I can relate to that in burlesque, using my whole body to create movement, and I can just appreciate how like the crouching down for so long, or like the being able to run or to move with this huge costuming on.
I don't know. Just being on stilts in general, rolling a bodysuit, you know.
No, I can't even imagine. I mean, it has to take such stamina and ability to be able to do that. It blows my mind all levels of this film. The fact that, everything that went into it, from even just the concept of it. I can't imagine being Jim Henson and having this concept and getting it all the way to its completion. He said it was like the film at the time they interviewed him, the project he was most proud of. And even though like I don't feel like this is like the most compelling storyline ever, I feel like everything that went into this film from start to finish, from the concept to, seeking out the right artist to create the images that you would build from, and then all of the people that built every single piece and all of the pieces that went into it, and then actually filming it and making sure that the movements were correct. It blows my mind that they were able to accomplish this.
It was really impressive.
Yeah.
Alrighty. And I think on that note, we'll close up the discussion. So why don't we start with Katie?
We can start with. I was gonna say we could start with me because I really have to pee.
Oh, Dustin, go right ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm Dustin Nelson. Why did I give my full name? What's wrong with me? I'm Dustin. I live here in Milwaukee, and I collect horror memorabilia wherever I find it. So movies, vinyl, figures, like it doesn't matter. I'll just pick it up. And I started a YouTube channel where I'm going to be trying to show off like my weekly pickup videos, as well as a handful of like horror-related content, because I feel like we don't get enough of it here. So our first long-form video is looking to be an interview with Tim Seeley, the creator of Hackslash, and a writer/artist for a number of horror-related like comics properties. And he does like Batman or something too. I don't know. No big deal. But yeah, so the channel we're launching is the Crypt of Horrors, because everything shorter was taken. And I also have an Instagram for just like pics of my horror collection, which has gotten pretty massive at this point. DHR Hunter, all one word. So I'm also a biology master's student, so I tend to notice the biology of like creatures in movies more. And we want to turn that into a series of reviews / blog posts for Inside Movies Galore. So we have most of a review for Peter Benchley's The Beast like ready to go. It just needs some like finishing touches, and hopefully we'd like to start posting once a week a new animal themed horror movie review, in addition to the stuff that I have on my current channel. So there's a lot going on.
Ambitious.
Awesome.
Yes.
Definitely cool.
I'm on no sleep and I had 1 beer. How am I still alive?
Katie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I'm Katie Cadaver from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm a body positive horror artist and alternative model. You can find me on patreon.com/Katie Cadaver or on Instagram at Third Eye Open. That's 3RDEYE0PEN. I'm also the makeup artist for the horror punk band Ratbat Spider. You can listen to them at ratbatspider.bandcamp.com. You can also see them coming up on September 22nd at Club Garibaldi in Milwaukee. I'm also a Dead Girl for Dead Girls Dark Coffin Classics horror TV show, and you can watch episodes at vimeo.com/DDCC. And I'm a performer and producer for Grindhouse Tees Burlesque Production out of Milwaukee here. You can find us on Facebook. And you can also see us on Saturday, September 29th at the Psychobilly Nightmare Freak Show at the Hoppers Haunted House in Rockford, Illinois. And I also am an editor for Movies Galore of Milwaukee. And I just did a new script and note worksheet for us here on the podcast, so we're kind of working off a new script, sort of, kind of. Still ironing out the kinks.
I want to give Katie a round of applause from all of us for doing that. So Everyone just clap your hands for her.
Just clap your hands.
Something.
No, it's my pleasure. Whatever I can do to help things move along, I'm happy to. And hopefully I will have some more reviews coming up and for the website and the page. Because on top of that, I'm also working as a Tromette for Trauma Entertainment, and everybody loves Trauma. You can find them at Troma.com. And then I also wanted to give a quick shout out to the Prop Shop out of Roanoke, Virginia. They sent me a really cool like replica Jason Voorhees hockey mask that they made. And I'm going to be going live and doing a Facebook Live video to show it off and to get everybody hooked up. So you can see that on Facebook when I get around to it eventually. But in the meantime, check them out. The Prop Shop VA, I think it is. Now I just lost my note. I had it on there. But it's the Prop Shop. If you look them up on Facebook, they have a Facebook page, I believe. And they do custom-made quality props and replicas.
Nice. So going over here to Red Raven, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I'm Red Raven, and I'm from Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and I book shows in the Milwaukee area. And I'm also a dead girl at Dead Girl's Dark Coffin Classics.
Awesome. Dane, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Dane Kyle. I'm a independent writer, director, filmmaker out of Charlotte, North Carolina, which is right smack in the path of Hurricane Florence. So
Don't die.
I know, that's what I was going to say. Hopefully I don't die, but assuming that I don't die, you know, that'll be interesting to live through. So yeah, just for all of the people in the path, like South Carolina, North Carolina, stay safe. But yeah, so last time that I was going to Dragon Con, that would have been 2 weekends ago. It was Labor Day weekend. And that went really, really well. I got to promote my girlfriend's upcoming fan series called Asylum Origins Harley. I got to meet some celebrities, including Tom Kenny and Tara Strong and some other people I haven't met before, which was quite exciting. But you know, there's quite a bit on the horizon yet. Right now, there's kind of a bit of a realignment period in terms of you know, what I'm focusing on it when. But you know, because there's always a lot to do, but it's just a matter of when to do it. When to do that project. So
okay. And going over here to Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes. Well, my name is Brandon. I go by Septum Sin. Run a channel called Septum Sin versus the World. I also am partners with my wife on a channel called That Nerd Couple. Matter of fact, one of the things we talked about tonight was Charles' band and his Puppet Master type stuff. We actually did a unboxing on that channel of the Full Moon Puppet Master collection, which is a really solid box signed by the man himself.
That was a fun video.
The other, of course, is our main channel, which is Septum Sin versus the World. We are all about the physical media in our channel, and we cover things like movie releases, celebrity deaths, what's coming out on TV and the movies. We also do pickup videos and reviews, and of course, finally, but of course not in the least, I do occasional reviews for Inside Movies Galore. I'll be probably picking up the pace on that with this newfound independent movies. I have one already filmed, as a matter of fact. I just have to get some editing done, so that will hopefully be up soon enough.
Awesome. And Jake, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right, I'm Jake. I go by Kodabuki Jake, and I frequently guest with Septum on Septum Sin versus the World. I also have my own channel, Kodabuki Jake, a YouTube channel dedicated to nature and enjoying the natural world, but I haven't been very frequent in my updates with that one. I plan to get better, but there are videos up. I also do have a Hub Pages channel that is the same story there. There's some stuff if you want to read it. And I do, on Code of Boot, on Septum Sin, I do have a solo review that went up this past week for two recent anime that I finished, Akame ga Kill and Squid Girl, and I'm going to be doing a series of those reviews for certain ones I'm going through. Basically, that's pretty much what's going on at the moment, I think.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
And my name is David Streggy. I run Inside Movies Galore. I also blog at Movies Galore Milwaukee, but I've been focusing more on the Inside Movies Galore channel for some video reviews. I want to get out there because I've become more confident with my voice. And not too recently, I had an interview with Michael Bergen, who worked with the same actor who played in what was that? That fish, not the fish movie, but the movie that was like the Creatures from the Black Lagoon that we did.
Sea Creature?
Huh?
The Shape of Water?
Yeah. The actor who played the character in there played in a short film called My Friend Max by this director. And when last we spoke, he had just recently finished a short film called I Am a Gun, and was going into working with a Wisconsin actress. And right now he's going around and campaigning on Kickstarter with a short film that he's called Idolin. Idolin. But you can definitely check it out. It's on this past Sunday, so you can check out the interview and the campaign. So, and also, recently I have started reviews with a site called Streamlit, which is a new streaming site. So I've been granted access along with Brandon, and we'll be getting some reviews out of films that are submitted to the site for viewage, and be giving out a discount for a $1 discount for those who want to go and view films on the site. So, in any case, I think it's appropriate if everyone makes the sound the Skeksis make.
What's going on?
Night, everyone. Like, share, and subscribe, and hopefully you enjoyed the discussion. Have a great
And head over to the Crypt of Horrors for content soon. After I sleep. Oh, God.